What the dog found. Minutes before the prince's wedding left his bride in shock. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The bells of Windsor had a different sound that morning. They were not the solemn bells of mourning that Clara remembered from her childhood when the late king had been carried through the gates in a carriage draped in black. Today they rang bright and eager, as if they themselves were impatient for the prince to take his vows. Clara carried a stack of freshly pressed linens in her arms and tried to keep them from trembling. The corridor outside the bridal apartments was a stream of silk, lace, and hurried footsteps. Footmen hurried past with boxes. Ladies' maids slipped in and out of doors like darting birds. Someone had dropped a ribbon on the floor. Another stepped over it without looking down. "Mind yourself, Clara," Mrs. Jenkins murmured as she swept by a basket of folded veils in her arms. "Do not stare at the finery. It is not for the likes of us." "I am not staring," Clara said quietly. She was lying. Everyone was staring. It was impossible not to. From the half-open door of the bridal chamber came the murmur of high voices, laughter, and the rustle of heavy silk. Lady Eleanor of Ashbourne had arrived in the castle 3 days before. In 3 days, she had turned every corridor into a path toward her. Every conversation seemed to circle back to her beauty, her grace, her excellent family. The servants repeated these things because the higher folk did, and the higher folk repeated them because the Queen did, and the Queen did because the kingdom expected it. Clara balanced the linens higher in her arms and stepped aside as 2 pages stumbled past with a great gilt mirror between them. "Gently," she whispered, though they did not hear her. "She will not vanish if the glass is less perfect." She moved down the corridor toward the prince's rooms. She knew the route by heart. She had been a child in these halls, the daughter of a groom. Once, when the prince had still been a boy and she had still had straw in her hair from the stables, she had brought him a book he had dropped. He had thanked her. He had remembered her name. Now she passed his door with her head bowed. Nobles went in and out, talking of treaties and alliances. A wedding, they said, was never just a wedding. "Clara?" The voice was low, male, familiar. She turned before she could stop herself. Prince Alexander stood in the doorway of his chamber, half dressed in his formal coat, the collar still loose. A valet hovered behind him with a needle and thread. His dark hair had already been pressed into obedient order, but his expression had not. His eyes, usually calm, seemed pulled in several directions at once. Clara dropped into a quick curtsy, nearly losing her hold on the linens. "Your Highness, forgive me. I did not mean to block the door." "You are not blocking anything." He stepped closer, despite the valet's nervous glance. "Are those for Lady Eleanor's rooms?" "Yes, Your Highness." His gaze went to her hands, to the faint reddening at her knuckles from the irons. "They work you too hard," he said. "They work everyone too hard today, sir," she answered, then wished she had chosen more careful words. He did not take offense. Instead, he gave a brief, weary smile. "It seems the entire kingdom has decided it must fit through this corridor before noon. Have you seen the chapel? It is covered in flowers. I cannot breathe for the scent." "That sounds very fine, sir," Clara said. "It is," he said. "At least, they tell me it is." He fell silent. The valet cleared his throat softly. "Your Highness, if we are to finish your cuffs before—" "Yes, yes," Alexander stepped back. "I shall not keep her from her duties." His gaze returned to Clara for a moment, and in it she saw something like a question. Or perhaps it was only her imagination. A prince on his wedding morning had more important things on his mind than the thoughts of a maid. "Good morning, Clara," he said. "Try not to let them trample you." She almost smiled. "I shall do my best, sir." He disappeared into his room again. The door closed. The valet's murmurs faded. Clara exhaled and turned away. Her heart was beating too fast for such a simple exchange. She shifted the linens and made herself walk toward the bridal rooms. Halfway there, she heard another voice. Higher, smoother, like a blade hidden under silk. "No, Martha, not that one. The other. Have you no eyes?" Clara's steps slowed. Lady Eleanor stood just inside the open door, surrounded by her maids. She wore a dressing gown, but it fitted her like something more regal. Her hair hung in rich waves over her shoulders, while a lady's maid perched on a stool, fingers tangled in curls and pins. Eleanor held up 2 ribbons, One pale, one deeper. The lighter ribbon makes the lace appear faded, she said. I cannot abide it. The other one, I said. Are we understood? Yes, my lady, Martha whispered. Eleanor's gaze flicked up and caught Clara in the doorway. Ah, she said. The linens at last. Bring them in, carefully. If you crease them, you shall learn how it feels to be pressed. Her maids laughed softly. Clara stepped forward, eyes down. Yes, my lady. She laid the linens on the bed, smoothing each fold. She tried not to listen to the maid behind her fighting with Eleanor's hair, or to Eleanor's complaint about the stiffness of the new shoes, or the pearls that did not sit quite as they should on her neck. You there, Eleanor said suddenly. Clara looked up. Yes, my lady. Your name is Clara, is it not? I am learning the names of the servants. She said it as one might say she was learning the names of the stables. Yes, my lady. Have you seen my lapdog, the little spaniel? They assure me he is somewhere in the castle. I cannot think why he is not at my feet. I have not seen him this morning, my lady. Eleanor sighed. Then find someone who has. I do not like to be without something that is mine, not even for a moment. She turned away, already dismissing Clara. The maids adjusted her gown, arranged the linens, fluttered about her. Clara stepped back, hands empty, feeling very small. In the corridor again, she almost ran into Mrs. Jenkins. Clara, do you mean to stand in the doorway like a broom? We have more to do than watch you daydream. Sorry, Mrs. Jenkins. What shall I do now? The kitchens have sent up the prince's breakfast tray. See that it reaches his table. And for heaven's sake, keep that dog of yours out from underfoot. His fur will end up on a nobleman's sleeve, and then we shall all be dismissed. Yes, Mrs. Jenkins. Clara hurried down the back stairs toward the servants' hall. At her heel, as if summoned by name, a small brown and white shape darted from behind a barrel. Oliver, she whispered. There you are. The little dog wagged his tail furiously. His ears were too big for his head. His left ear was torn at the edge from some old scrape. He had appeared at the castle gates years earlier, half-starved, and Clara had smuggled him scraps until he simply never left. You must not be up here today, she said, stooping to scratch his head. It is madness already. You will be trodden on by a duke, and then what shall I do without you? Oliver licked her fingers. She loaded the breakfast tray, careful not to spill, and set it on a rolling cart. The smell of hot bread and tea rose up, making her stomach ache. There had been no time for the servants' own breakfast yet. Come along then, she murmured to Oliver. But mind you keep out of sight. If Mrs. Jenkins sees you, she will turn you into a rug. She pushed the cart back up the stairs, keeping to the servants' passages. Oliver trotted behind, paws silent on the stone. At the prince's door, a guard stepped aside to let her pass. The prince's breakfast, Clara said. Leave it there, the guard replied. They will call when they are ready. Clara obeyed, then glanced down at Oliver. This is where we part, sir, she whispered. Out to the gardens with you. It is safer there today. Find a sunny spot and sleep. And do not dig up the flower beds, or I shall have to deny knowing you. She opened a side door that led out toward the inner gardens. Oliver sniffed at the warm air and wagged his tail. Go on, she urged. He slipped through the gap, nose to the ground, already hunting for interesting scents among the trimmed hedges and pruned roses. Clara closed the door softly and went back to her work. The hours ran by in a blur. She fetched and carried. She smoothed creases and fetched pins that fell from nervous fingers. She carried messages from one end of the hall to the other, always at a run, always careful not to collide with anyone who could have her dismissed with a single look. Whenever she found herself near a window that looked out onto the gardens, she tried to catch sight of Oliver. Once she saw a small figure dart between two rose bushes. Another time she heard a faint bark over the hum of voices. "Clara!" Mrs. Jenkins snapped. "Do not stand idling. The time grows short." Clara moved again. As the morning wore on, the air in the corridors seemed to grow thicker. The bells began to ring in earnest now, not for practice, but to call the kingdom to attention. Guests in rich clothes arrived from the outer courtyard, their carriages rumbling through the gate. The Queen's ladies rustled past, their expressions composed, their talk light and careful. "Is it not splendid?" one of the younger maids whispered to Clara as they passed each other carrying bundles. "It is," Clara said softly. "Splendid. And suffocating." Near noon, After delivering yet another armful of lace to the chapel, Clara slipped into a narrow side passage for a moment's rest. Her back ached, her hands smarted, her heart felt sore in a way that had nothing to do with labor. She leaned against the cool stone and closed her eyes. For a moment, she imagined another life, not one where she married a prince. She was not foolish, just one where her days were not entirely spent carrying the comfort of others. Something soft bumped against her ankle. She opened her eyes. "Oliver," she breathed. "You wicked creature. I told you to stay in the garden." Oliver stood in front of her, panting lightly, his white paws stained with dirt. He looked enormously pleased with himself. In his mouth, he held something long and narrow, wrapped in mud. "What have you got there?" Clara asked. He wagged his tail, stepped closer, and dropped the object onto her shoe. It landed with a soft, solid weight. "Ugh, you dreadful dog," she muttered, half laughing. "It is filthy." She bent down, picked it up between finger and thumb, and frowned. It was not a stick. It was too straight, too regular. Under the mud she could feel the smoothness of leather, the sharp edge of sealed wax. Her heart gave a small, inexplicable leap. "Where did you find this?" she whispered. Oliver only wagged his tail. Clara looked quickly up and down the passage. The narrow way between the outer door and the inner corridor was empty, the sounds of the castle muffled beyond thick walls. For a moment she hesitated, then lifted her apron and wiped some of the dirt away from the object in her hand. A leather case emerged, simple but well made. At its center was a thick lump of red wax, still mostly intact. On its surface, pressed into the wax, was a symbol she knew well. She had seen it on banners, on coins, on the great seal upon the throne room doors. The royal crest. Her mouth went dry. Her fingers shook as she turned the case gently, looking for any sign that the seal had been broken before. The wax was cracked at the edges, but the impression in its heart remained whole. No hand had opened it since the day it had been closed. Below the crest, stamped in neat letters, was a name. To His Royal Highness, Prince Alexander. Below that, in smaller letters, another name, the name of the late king. Clara's breath caught. Memory rushed up at her, a kind-eyed man in a dark coat, bending down to hand a small child an apple at the castle gate, his voice saying, "Be good to the horses for me, little one," the bells tolling the day his coffin passed. She looked at the mud on the case, at the torn earth on Oliver's paws, and the question formed in her mind before she could stop it. "What were you doing in the ground?" she murmured to the letter. "Who put you there?" Oliver whined softly and nudged her knee. He seemed impatient, as if he had brought her a treasure and expected praise, not silence. Clara's thoughts raced. A sealed royal letter, still unopened, bearing the late king's hand, addressed to his son. Buried in the garden, in earth recently disturbed. Found on the very morning when that son was to marry. This could not be nothing. She knew her place. She knew her station. There were few rules that servants understood more clearly than this one. Do not meddle in the affairs of those above you. Touch nothing that bears the royal seal. But this, she thought, does not belong in the earth. It belongs in his hands. Her mind flew back to the prince's eyes when he had spoken to her that morning. The quiet question in them. The way he had said, "Try not to let them trample you." If she said nothing, if she put the letter back where Oliver had found it, she would be safe. No one would blame her. No one would know. If she delivered it, she might be accused of theft, of prying, of overstepping. She might be dismissed. Worse, she might be thought to have read it, though she would not dream of breaking the seal. She swallowed hard. "Oliver," she whispered, "why must you bring me such trouble?" He panted happily. She tucked the letter case under the fold of her apron, pressing it against her waist as if warmth could hide it. She did not know yet what she would do, only that she could not leave it lying in the passage like a dropped glove. Her footsteps sounded loud to her ears as she stepped back into the busier corridor. Voices flowed around her. Servants hurried past with trays, with flowers, with last-minute repairs to hems and cuffs. No one paid her particular attention. She was only Clara. She had always been only Clara. She moved toward the stair that led up to the prince's chambers. The letter felt heavy against her. At each turn she expected a hand to land on her shoulder, a voice to demand what she carried. No one stopped her. At the top of the stairs, she paused. The guard still stood outside Alexander's door, but now his expression was more tense. Murmurs and footsteps came from within. Clara opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. What could she say? "Excuse me, sir, my dog found this royal secret buried in the roses?" Her courage failed. She stepped back. Perhaps she should seek Mrs. Jenkins' advice. No, Mrs. Jenkins would tell her to leave it alone. A letter like this might disappear again before it reached the prince. Clara bit her lip and turned toward a quieter passage, intending to find a moment, any moment, to think. She did not get far. A murmur in the corridor ahead stilled. Servants straightened their backs, pressed themselves to the walls. A pair of ladies moved aside with small, practiced courtesies. Lady Eleanor walked toward her. This time she was fully dressed for the ceremony. Her gown flowed behind her in a soft whisper. Pearls shone at her throat and in her hair. Her face was serene, every line practiced, every smile measured. The sight of her made Clara's heart quicken, and not only because of the awe that beauty and rank could inspire. There was something in Eleanor's gaze when it fell upon the staff at rest, something sharp beneath the surface. "Do keep the corridor clear," Eleanor said to no one in particular. "One might think this a market street. I am to be married in a matter of minutes, and I should like not to trip over an apron." A soft laugh rose from those around her. Clara pressed herself against the wall, bowing her head, hoping to be invisible. Her fingers curled instinctively over the shape beneath her apron, though she did not fully realize she had done it. Eleanor's steps slowed. "You there?" she said. Clara's stomach dropped. "Yes, my lady," she murmured. Eleanor looked at her not as one might look at a person, but as if she were a piece of furniture slightly out of place. "You are the same girl as before," she said. "Clara, the one with the unfortunate dog?" "Yes, my lady." "Have you found him yet?" Eleanor asked, though her tone said she did not much care. "He is in the gardens, my lady," Clara replied. "Good. See that he remains there. I will not have him under the tables, begging from foreign dignitaries like some common street animal." "Yes, my lady," Clara said again. Eleanor's eyes might have moved on. They might have passed over her and gone to the window, the flowers, the distant chapel. They did not. Instead, they dropped to Clara's hands, to the way one rested too tightly over her apron. The faint bulge beneath the cloth was slight but not invisible. "What have you there?" Eleanor asked. Clara's mouth went dry. "Nothing, my lady. Merely my hands." Eleanor's lips curved, though it was not quite a smile. "Your hands do not usually protrude in such a fashion, I think. Show me." Clara swallowed. "It is only something my dog brought me, my lady," she managed. "It is dirty. I was about to throw it away." "Then you will have no objection to showing it." Eleanor's voice remained soft, but there was a new thread in it now, a note of command that did not allow argument. The corridor seemed to grow still. The nearby servants watched from lowered eyes, listening without appearing to do so. Clara's fingers clenched around the letter case. She could feel the edge of the wax pressing into her skin. "It is nothing of importance, my lady," she whispered. "I would not wish to soil your gown." Eleanor took a single step closer. The pearls at her throat gleamed. Her perfume was faint but precise like everything else about her. "Clara," she said quietly, "you will remove your hand from your apron and show me what you hold there. Now." Clara lifted her eyes, just for a moment. What she saw in Eleanor's gaze was not curiosity. It was something harder, colder, like a hand closing over a secret. Her heart thudded. Every instinct told her to obey. Another, smaller voice whispered that this did not belong to Eleanor. It belonged to the man Eleanor was about to marry. Her hand shook as she drew it away from her apron. The fold of cloth fell back. The corner of the leather case showed, still streaked with dried mud, the faint impression of the royal crest catching the light. Lady Eleanor's polite expression faded. For an instant, all the practiced warmth dropped from her face. In its place came something raw and stark, her gaze fixed on the very thing Clara was trying to hide. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Eleanor's eyes snapped up to Clara's. "Where did you get that?" she asked. Her voice was still low, but the softness was gone. Clara's fingers closed again over the leather. "My dog found it in the garden, my lady," she said quickly. "I was on my way to—" "To what?" Eleanor cut in. "To deliver it. To whom?" Clara opened her mouth, closed it again, fighting a stammer. To the prince, my lady, it bears his name. A faint murmur stirred among the watching servants. Eleanor's lips pressed into a line. She took another step forward. And you decided, she said, that you would carry a sealed royal letter through the corridors of the castle. In your apron. I thought he should see it, Clara said. The seal is unbroken. I did not read it. I swear it, my lady. I do not care what you swear, Eleanor replied. You had no right to touch it. Clara swallowed. I meant no harm, meaning no harm is the excuse of fools, Eleanor said. She turned her head slightly. You? Call the steward. A footman hurried off without a word. Clara's heart began to pound harder. My lady, she tried. Oliver dug it out of the soil. It was buried. Someone must have— Buried it, Eleanor repeated, with a short, disbelieving laugh. What a fanciful story, and convenient. How fortunate that your animal unearthed something so important on this particular morning. It is the truth, Clara said. I would not lie about— You have already overstepped, Eleanor said sharply. I wonder what else you would do for the sake of a story. Servants shifted. No one spoke. It was as if the entire corridor were holding its breath. The steward arrived almost at once, his keys jangling at his belt. You sent for me, my lady? He asked, bowing. Yes, Eleanor said calmly, as if nothing were amiss. Your maid here has something in her possession that I believe belongs to the prince. She claims an animal gave it to her. Clara felt the sting in her cheeks. I did not claim— Silence, Eleanor said, her gaze cutting back to her. The steward looked from one to the other. What is it the girl carries? He asked. Eleanor extended a hand. Show us, she said. Clara hesitated. It belongs to the prince, she repeated, more softly now. I thought it wrong to leave it buried. Eleanor's eyes flashed. It will belong to whomever the prince chooses to entrust it, she said. At present, that is not you. Clara looked at the steward. His expression was difficult to read, but she saw no help there, only caution. Give it here, Clara, he said. You know the rules. We do not handle such things. Her fingers would not seem to obey her. The leather felt glued to her skin. If you keep it, Eleanor said quietly, it will be theft. The word struck the air like a stone. Clara flinched. I'm not a thief, she whispered. Then prove it, Eleanor replied. Let go. Clara drew a breath that trembled. Slowly, she lifted the letter case from her apron and placed it in the steward's waiting hands. The steward glanced at the seal and his eyes widened. By heaven, he muttered. This is exactly what should not be in a maid's keeping, Eleanor finished. You see now why I thought it wise to summon you. Clara's throat burned. It was in the earth, she said again. Oliver dug it up near the roses. I did not open it. I did not know— It is not your place to know, Eleanor said. Her tone was smooth again now, her expression composed as if she were merely settling an unfortunate misunderstanding. The steward adjusted his grip on the letter. What would you have me do, my lady? He asked. Shall I deliver it at once to His Highness? Eleanor's gaze flicked to the chapel end of the corridor, where faint music could be heard as musicians tuned their instruments. The prince is preparing for his wedding, she said. He has enough to concern him. I would not trouble him with forgotten documents or the whims of a servant's imagination at such a moment. It is not imagination, Clara protested. Eleanor ignored her. Keep the letter safe, she told the steward. We shall present it to His Highness after the ceremony, when his mind is no longer divided between duty and affection. She let the last word linger just enough to suggest that she was thinking of him with only tenderness. The steward nodded. As you wish, my lady. And the girl? Eleanor asked. He looked at Clara. We cannot ignore what has happened, he said reluctantly. At best, this was foolishness. At worst, I did not steal it, Clara said, her voice breaking. Please, I did not. Intention is difficult to measure, Eleanor said, but the prince must be protected from careless hands. Until the matter is understood, I think it best she be kept from wandering freely. You would confine her? The steward asked. Only for a time, Eleanor replied. For her own sake as much as ours. If she is innocent, there will be no harm done. Clara stared at her. For my sake, she repeated numbly. Eleanor turned her full gaze on her, the pearls at her ears gleaming. You handle what is not yours, she said quietly. You speak of burying and digging as if you were part of some little play. Do you understand how dangerous it is to meddle in affairs beyond you? I understand only that the prince should see what his father wrote him, Clara said suddenly, the words bursting out before she could stop them. A fresh murmur rippled through the corridor. Eleanor's jaw tightened. You presume much, she said. The steward sighed. Clara, he said, you will come with me. He gestured to a footman. See her to the servants' quarters. She is not to leave until I give word. The footman stepped forward and took Clara gently but firmly by the arm. Her legs felt weak. The corridor swam. All she could see was the letter in the steward's hands, the unbroken seal, the name written in that clear, strong script. But the prince, she started. The prince hears many things in a day, Eleanor said coolly. He does not need to hear wild tales of buried letters while he is preparing to take a wife. Clara's fingers twitched at her sides. She wanted to reach for the case again, to snatch it back, to run straight to Alexander's door and thrust it at him. She did none of those things. She could not. The footman's grip tightened. Her throat closed. Come along, the footman murmured, not unkindly. As they turned away, Oliver slipped past Clara's skirts, bewildered eyes darting between the faces around him. Leave that animal, Eleanor said sharply. Someone take him out. I will not have him under my feet. A page bent down to catch him, but Oliver dodged, skittering back. Oliver, Clara called over her shoulder, her voice faint. Go, boy. Out to the garden. Oliver whined. Eleanor waved a hand. He is an annoyance, she said. I do not care where he goes. Only see that he is not where I am. Clara was led away down the side corridor. Her steps sounded hollow. Each one carried her farther from the prince's rooms, from the chapel, from the letter. In a small plain chamber below stairs, the footman released her arm and closed the door. You will remain here, the steward said, standing in the doorway. Do you understand, Clara? She nodded numbly. I did not mean, she began. I believe you, he said quietly. But belief will not unmake what is done. You touched what you should not. It is a grave matter. Will they dismiss me? She asked. I do not know, he said. It may depend on what His Highness decides when he has seen the letter. Her heart lurched. He will see it, she whispered. The steward glanced down at the case in his hand, then back at her. That is not for me to decide, he said. I will keep it safe until I am summoned. He closed the door. The lock clicked. Clara sank onto the narrow bench under the small window, her hands twisted in her lap. Through the glass, she could see only a strip of grey sky and the edge of a chimney. She did not know how much time passed. The bells continued to ring, sometimes near, sometimes distant. Voices rose and fell beyond the door. At one point, footsteps hurried by and she heard someone laugh. She pressed her palms over her eyes. It is only until he is married, she told herself in a whisper. After that, none of this will matter. They will forget. The thought pierced her. She dropped her hands and stared at the door. Somewhere above her, Alexander was being dressed in his finest coat. Somewhere not far from him, a leather case sat in the steward's hands, containing words meant for him and no one else. She could do nothing now. Her choices had already carried her to this bench. A small sound made her look up. A narrow gap between the floor and the door showed a sliver of shadow. Something small and furry pressed its nose to the crack, sniffed, then gave a soft, anxious whine. Oliver, she breathed, dropping to her knees. His tongue flicked through the gap and licked her fingertips. You foolish, loyal creature, she said. How did you find me? He whined again. Go away, she whispered. You must not be caught here. I am already in enough trouble. If they see you near me, they will blame you for this as well. He scratched lightly at the door. She rested her forehead against the wood. It is all right, she lied. I am only to stay here for a little while. Then we will see. Above them a deep gong sounded. Then another. The bells began a more deliberate peal. The hour had come. In the prince's chamber, Alexander stood before the mirror, his coat finally fastened, the sash across his chest perfectly aligned. Courtiers hovered like anxious birds. A man fussed with his cuffs. Another adjusted the chain at his neck. Your Highness, the master of ceremonies said, bowing. It is time. Alexander looked at himself, then at the door, then back at his reflection. For a moment he saw not the prince, not the groom, but a boy standing alone in a long, silent hallway, a book clutched in his hands, watching his father disappear into a room where decisions were made without him. He exhaled. "I am ready," he said. The master of ceremonies smiled. "Her ladyship will be radiant," he said. "The kingdom rejoices in this day." Alexander's face tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Yes," he said. "So I have been told." They stepped into the corridor. Guards straightened. Trumpets sounded from a distance, announcing that the groom was on his way to the chapel. Halfway down the corridor, a commotion caught his ear. A voice, slightly breathless, called, "Your Highness!" He turned. The steward hurried toward him, the letter case in his hand. Alexander frowned. "What is it?" he asked. "We are about to begin." "Forgive me, sir," the steward said, bowing. "This was found in the possession of one of the maids. Lady Eleanor requested that I keep it until a suitable moment. I thought the moment should be sooner rather than later." Alexander's gaze dropped to the case. The crest caught the light. His breath shortened. "Who wrote it?" he asked, though he thought he already knew. "The seal says it is from your late father, sir," the steward said, "addressed to you. The seal is unbroken." A hush fell over those nearby. The master of ceremonies shifted uneasily. "Your Highness," he murmured, "perhaps this might wait. The guests are seated, the Queen is in her place, her ladyship is walking even now toward the chapel to pause the ceremony over an old letter." "An old letter from my father," Alexander said, his voice quiet but firm. The man fell silent. Alexander took the case from the steward. His fingers felt cold against the leather. "How came this to be in a maid's keeping?" he asked. The steward hesitated. "Her name is Clara, sir," he said. "She claimed that her dog unearthed it in the garden, that it had been buried beneath the roses." Clara. The name struck him with unexpected force. "What did she intend to do with it?" he asked. "She said she meant to bring it to you," the steward replied. "She did not break the seal. Lady Eleanor believed it best that I hold it until the ceremony was done, but you have brought it now," Alexander said. "Yes, sir." The corridor seemed narrower suddenly. The hum of the castle grew distant, as if he were underwater. He looked down at the seal, the impression of the crest, the familiar curve of his father's signet. "Your Highness," the master of ceremonies said gently, "the people are waiting." "So is he," Alexander said under his breath. He slipped a thumb under the edge of the wax. It cracked with a soft, final sound. He drew out the folded paper within. The letter was not long. His father's handwriting ran across the page in strong, even lines. When he reached the end, Alexander's hand tightened. The warnings were not vague. They were not the idle suspicions of a sick man. They were clear, written on a day when the king had still possessed all his faculties. "Beware the Ashbourne alliance. They seek not only favor but influence over the very succession. Lady Eleanor's charm is an instrument, not a gift. I fear they would use my son as a means, not see him as an end. If you receive this, and I am no longer here to speak, trust not the appearance of devotion where truth has been buried." The last line blurred. He blinked. "Your Highness?" the master of ceremonies asked. Alexander refolded the letter with care. "Where is Clara?" he asked. The steward shifted. "Confined to the servants' quarters, sir," he said. "Lady Eleanor requested me precautions." "Precautions against what?" Alexander asked sharply. "She feared for your safety, sir," the steward said. "She thought it strange that such a letter should appear in such a way, and that a maid should be carrying it. She believed it could be part of some scheme." "A scheme," Alexander repeated. He looked up. At the far end of the corridor he could see the doorway that led toward the chapel. Beyond it, a glimpse of flowers, of people in their seats, of light from high windows. Somewhere else in the castle, Clara sat alone behind a locked door because she had carried to him what was his. "Your Highness," the master of ceremonies said again, more urgent now, "it truly is time. If we delay much longer, it will be seen as an insult to your guests, to Lady Eleanor, to the alliance itself." Eleanor. The letter's words pulsed at the edge of his thoughts. "Lady Eleanor's charm is an instrument, not a gift." He drew a slow breath. "The girl," he said. "Clara. Was she known to trouble the household before this?" "No, sir," the steward said at once. "She is a hard worker, quiet. I have had no cause to complain of her." "She has always been honest," another servant blurted before he could stop himself. He reddened. "Forgive me, sir, but it is so." Alexander glanced at him. "And yet she is accused of stealing from me," he said. "No one used that word, Your Highness," the steward said quickly. "Not directly. only that she handled what she should not. And yet she brought it toward me, Alexander said. He looked down once more at the letter. His father's script seemed to look back at him. Trust not the appearance of devotion where truth has been buried. He closed his eyes briefly. I will not walk into that chapel with this unanswered, he said. The master of ceremonies stared. Sir, he whispered. I will go to my wedding, Alexander said, but not before I have spoken with the person who risked much to bring me this. Summon Clara to me. The steward hesitated. My lord, she is... Do it, Alexander said. His tone left no room for argument. The steward bowed, turned, and strode away. Alexander stood still, the folded letter in his hand. The sound of the bells grew louder, then muffled again as a door closed somewhere between them and the chapel. In the small chamber below stairs, Clara sat very straight as the door opened. Two men stood there, the steward and a guard. Clara, the steward said, His Highness has requested your presence. Her heart jumped. Requested? She echoed. Yes, the steward said. Come at once. She rose, legs unsteady. Oliver darted forward, but the guard blocked him with his foot. The dog stays, the man said. He cannot come where we are going. It is all right, Clara whispered to Oliver. Stay. His eyes followed her as she stepped into the corridor between the steward and the guard. They moved quickly, taking a back stair. The air seemed thinner as they climbed. Clara's stomach knotted. What does he want? She asked in a low voice. To hear from your own mouth how you came by that letter, the steward replied. Say only the truth. It is the only thing that may help you now. They reached a small chamber near the main corridor, a room with a single tall window and a plain table. Alexander stood there alone, the letter in his hand. When Clara entered, she stopped just inside the threshold and dropped into a curtsy. Your Highness, she said, barely above a whisper. You may leave us, Alexander said to the others. The steward hesitated. Sir, ought there not to be a witness? He asked. Alexander looked at him. I have had enough witnesses today, he said. I will speak with her alone. Wait outside. The door closed behind them with a solid click. For a moment neither spoke. Clara kept her eyes on the floor. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure he must hear it. Clara, he said at last, and his voice was not angry. It was tired, confused. Look at me. She raised her eyes. He held up the letter. This, he said, was found in your keeping. They say your dog brought it to you. That you meant to bring it to me, is that the truth? Yes, sir, she said at once. Oliver dug it from the earth near the roses. The soil was freshly turned. I wiped away the mud and saw the crest. I knew it must be yours. You did not open it, he said. No, sir, she said. I would not. It is not my place. He studied her face. Why did you not take it to the steward at once? He asked. Why carry it yourself? She swallowed. I feared it might vanish again, she admitted. If someone had buried it, they might wish it to remain unseen. I thought if anyone should decide its fate, it should be you. She said the last words quickly, afraid of them as soon as they were out. His gaze did not harden. Lady Eleanor believes you sought to use it, he said, that you might have been part of some scheme to disturb the wedding, that this letter was produced at a convenient time. Clara flinched. I am not part of anyone's scheme, sir, she said. No one asked me to do this. I have spoken to no one but you and the steward. I only wished to be honest. He was quiet for a moment. You risked much, he said. I did not think of the risk, she replied. Perhaps that was foolish. His mouth twisted in something like a rueful smile. Foolishness and courage often look alike, he said. She blinked. I was told you were confined, he added. Who ordered it? Lady Eleanor, sir, she said. She thought it best. For my sake, she said. He exhaled slowly. For your sake, he repeated. A faint sound outside the room drew both their gazes. Voices in the corridor. The master of ceremonies, speaking in urgent tones to someone. Your Highness, came the muffled words. The Archbishop is waiting. The Queen is waiting. Lady Eleanor is at the chapel door. We cannot delay much longer without offence. Alexander looked back at Clara. If I had not seen this letter, he said quietly, I would be walking into that chapel now without question. I would take vows with the blessing of a father whose last words to me I had never read. He looked down at the folded page in his hand. Instead, he went on, I stand here with doubts in my mind and a maid before me who has nothing to gain and much to lose by bringing me truth. Clara's throat tightened. I ask nothing, sir, she said quickly. Only that you know what was hidden from you. He met her eyes. I believe you, he said. She stared at him. You do? She whispered. Yes, he said, because you have never lied to me. The door opened before she could answer. The master of ceremonies burst in, flustered and pale. Your Highness, I beg you, he said. We are beyond late. The foreign dignitaries are restless. The Queen is sending word. Lady Eleanor is asking what has happened. If we delay further, it will be a scandal. Alexander straightened. Tell them, he said, that there was an unforeseen matter and that I shall be there shortly. I must decide how to proceed. With respect, sir, the man said, you must proceed by walking down that aisle. Alexander's gaze cooled. I must proceed by doing what is right, he said, even if that displeases those who came to be entertained. The master of ceremonies blanched. What shall I tell Lady Eleanor? He asked. Tell her, Alexander said, that I have read my father's last words to me, and that I will not be hurried into a vow I do not fully understand. The man opened and closed his mouth, then bowed, retreating. Alexander turned back to Clara. You are not to be punished, he said. I will see to that. Whatever happens next, know that. Tears pricked her eyes. Thank you, sir, she whispered. Outside, hurried footsteps moved away. Orders were called along the corridor. The hum of the castle shifted, uneasy. In the confusion, no one noticed Oliver slip out from the servant's stair, nose to the ground, searching for a familiar scent. He trotted along the passage, weaving between legs, dodging feet, ears pricked. The sound and smell of the chapel drew him, bright and strange. Between the rush of skirts and the swish of cloaks, he caught another scent. The leather of the case, the trace of his own paws in the dried mud upon it. He followed it eagerly. There ahead the steward hurried toward the chapel doors, the letter held tight in his hand, summoned to stand near the Queen until the prince appeared. He did not see the small dog angling toward him. His Highness will be but a moment, someone assured a waiting lord. There is nothing amiss. Oliver darted forward. Hey, cried a footman, that wretched dog again. He reached down to grab him, but Oliver wriggled free, leaped, and his teeth closed not on flesh, but on leather. The steward shouted in surprise. Oliver did not bite hard, only enough to tug. The sudden weight on his hand startled the steward. His fingers loosened. The letter slipped. Time seemed to slow. It tumbled from the steward's grasp, slid across the polished floor and skidded to a stop just inside the open door of the chapel. The leather case slid over the polished stone and turned once before coming to rest just inside the chapel door. For a moment, no one understood what had happened. Then a low murmur ran through the guests seated nearest the aisle. Something has fallen, someone whispered. A gentleman in a dark coat bent to pick it up. He turned it in his hand, frowning at the cracked wax and the crest. Give that here, the steward gasped, hurrying forward, pale. That is not for you. He snatched the case back, clutching it to his chest. At the far end of the chapel, the choir's voices were just beginning to rise in a soft, expectant hymn. The organist's fingers hovered over the keys. The archbishop stood ready with his book open. In the front pew, the Queen Mother held her folded hands tightly together. She turned as she heard the disturbance. What is this? She asked in a low tone. The steward bowed his head, still clutching the letter. Nothing, Your Majesty, he said quickly. A small mishap. The dog, she repeated. Oliver darted past him, tail wagging, then froze under the weight of all the staring eyes. His ears drooped. Get that animal out of here, a courtier hissed. A boy reached for him. Oliver dodged, ducked under the nearest pew, and vanished beneath a forest of hems and polished shoes. Leave the creature, the Queen said sharply. He is not the cause of our delay. She fixed the steward with her gaze. You are pale, she observed. What do you carry? The steward swallowed. A letter, Your Majesty, he said, from the late king, addressed to His Highness. The Queen's fingers tightened on her gloves. And why is it in your hands? It was found, ma'am, he said. This morning, in unusual circumstances. His Highness has already read it. He asked me to keep it safe until after the ceremony. She held out her hand. Let me see. He hesitated only a heartbeat before placing it in her grasp. She looked down at the familiar crest, at the fractured wax. "My husband's seal," she murmured. "I did not know there remained any letters of his unread." Her eyes lifted, sharp now. "Who found this?" she asked. "Clara, ma'am," the steward said. "One of the maids. She said her dog dug it from the earth in the garden." The Queen frowned. "Buried?" she repeated. "Yes, ma'am." "And Lady Eleanor?" the Queen asked. "What did she say?" "That it was best not to trouble His Highness before the ceremony," the steward admitted. "That we should wait." The Queen's mouth turned grim. "Where is my son?" she asked. "In a side chamber, ma'am," the Master of Ceremonies answered from the aisle. He looked strained. "He insists on delaying. He says he must decide how to proceed." "The Archbishop is waiting," the Queen said. "The guests are restless. Eleanor is what?" The voice came from behind them, clear and controlled. Lady Eleanor stood in the side doorway reserved for the bride, her gown like a small wave of light around her. Her veil had not yet been lowered. Her hair shone with pearls. Only her eyes did not fit. There was a tightness there that did not belong to a happy bride. She stepped into the chapel, her ladies fluttering behind her. "I have been ready for some minutes," she said. "I was told the prince had been delayed. I begin to fear there is some mischief afoot." Her gaze fell on the Queen, then on the letter in her hand. She froze. "What is that?" she asked. The Queen lifted it. "A letter from the late king," she said. "To Alexander. Found this morning. It seems my son has read his father's words at last." There was a softness in her voice when she spoke of her husband that had nothing to do with ceremony. Then it hardened again. "Why was I not told of this? Why was it not brought to me?" Eleanor's jaw worked once before she forced a smile. "Your Majesty," she said, moving closer, "I did not wish to trouble you with a trifle on such a day. A mere forgotten paper, discovered by a servant and a stray dog, with no way to prove its journey. I thought it best to let the prince decide its importance in private, when the weight of expectation did not press so heavily upon him." "Yet you advised that it be kept from him until after the vows," the Queen said. "Did you not?" Eleanor's smile sharpened. "I was concerned for his peace of mind," she replied. "We all know how much he carries today. A sudden letter from his father might stir emotions that would make this moment harder for him. I hope to spare him." "Spare him the knowledge of his father's thoughts?" the Queen asked. Eleanor's hands tightened around her bouquet. "I did not say that," she said. "I only wished to protect him from being overwhelmed." "And from what else?" came Alexander's voice from the side entrance. He walked in through the small door that led from the vestry, his expression composed but pale. The letter his mother held was mirrored by the folded paper in his hand. The chapel fell utterly silent. Every gaze turned to him. He walked to the space before the altar, halfway between the Archbishop and the nearest pews, and stopped. Eleanor's eyes followed his hand. "You have read it," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," he said. "And you chose to leave me waiting," she said softly. He did not flinch. "I chose," he said, "not to walk into a vow without understanding why my father thought it important to warn me against the very alliance I'm about to enter." A stir ran through the pews. Eleanor moved forward a step, careful, measured. "Alexander," she said, using his name rather than his title, "we both know how suspicious old men can become, surrounded by courtiers whispering into their ears. Your father was ill toward the end. He worried over shadows that were not there. I begged him even then not to doubt my family, but he could not hear me. I had hoped you would not be burdened with those old fears." He looked at her. "In his letter," he said, "he speaks not of shadows but of specific conversations, of proposals from your relatives, of pressures to secure the succession through them. He writes of your charm as something turned toward an end, not as something freely given." Her throat worked. "My family sought what any noble house would seek," she said. "Security, position. We are not saints, but neither are we monsters. Your father misread ambition as malice." "And the letter?" he asked. "How did it come to be buried under the roses, Eleanor?" The use of her name without honorific hung between them. Around them, courtiers pretended not to listen. None of them succeeded. Eleanor's eyes flickered. "I do not know what that maid told you," she said. "Only that she is mistaken or lying. I have never ordered any letter to be buried." Why would I? It is absurd. The earth near the roses was freshly turned, Alexander said. The maid found the letter there this morning. Her dog dug it up. A stray dog is hardly a reliable witness, Eleanor said sharply. The seal was unbroken, Alexander continued. The letter had never been read. Whoever placed it there used the earth as a hiding place, not as a shelf. Eleanor drew a breath. Then blame the gardener, she said. Blame some clumsy servant. Why would I care where your letters lie, so long as your heart lies with me? Her words were smooth, but a tremor ran through them. The Queen watched her with narrowed eyes. You saw such a letter in my husband's study once, she said slowly. Years ago. I remember you asking about it. You said something about unfair judgments. Eleanor's jaw tightened. I had forgotten, she said. It was a long time ago. Much has happened since. Not, it seems, to the letter, the Queen said. It has not travelled much, only from my husband's desk to a patch of earth. Eleanor spread her hands. If someone hid it, she said, it was not at my command. Your Majesty, I beg you, do not let an old doubt cloud what we have built. The Prince and I have spent months preparing for this day. We have spoken for hours, shared thoughts, hopes. And in all those hours, Alexander said quietly, did you ever tell me that my father doubted you, that he wrote as much? She closed her mouth. You were grieving, she said after a heartbeat. What good would it have done to sow such fear in you? I chose to spare you that pain. I thought it kinder to let the dead rest and the living move forward. Kinder for whom? He asked. Her eyes flashed. For you, she said. For all of us. For the kingdom. Alexander, think what this looks like. We stand at the altar. The world watches. For you to waver now because of the ghost of a man who is not here to explain himself. He is here, Alexander said, lifting the letter. On this page. In his own hand. And there is something else. His gaze swept the chapel, then returned to Eleanor. There is a maid, he said, who found this letter buried, who brought it to me, knowing she might be punished for touching it. She had no reason to do so, no promise of reward. Only the belief that I ought to know what was hidden from me. Eleanor's lips curled. And you trust her more than me? She asked softly. A servant with mud on her shoes and a stray at her heels. He did not answer at once. I trust that she has never deceived me, he said at last. The quiet in the chapel deepened. Eleanor's fingers tightened so hard on her bouquet that a petal dropped. You insult me, she said, her voice rising despite herself. Before your mother, before the court, on the day of our wedding, I seek the truth, he said. And you think I have not given it to you? She replied. Every day, in every conversation. Have you? He asked. Have you never tried to sway me? Never told me which advisers were not to be trusted because they did not favor your family? Never asked me to remove those who did not look kindly on your house? That is politics, she said quickly. You will be king. You must choose whom to trust. And you would choose for me, he said. Her nostrils flared. I would stand beside you, she said. I would help you bear the weight of the crown. I would give you heirs. Is that now a crime? No, he said quietly. But burying my father's warning might be. She took a step toward him. I did not bury it, she hissed under her breath. Then who did? He asked. Silence answered. The Queen rose from her pew. Alexander, she said, whatever else is said here, this cannot continue before the Archbishop and the guests. If there is to be questioning, let it be in private, not in whispers across the aisle. He bowed his head slightly. You are right, Mother, he said. He turned back to Eleanor. I will not drag you through interrogation before all, he said, but neither will I stand and vow blindly. What do you mean to do? She demanded. For now, he said, I will step aside and speak with the one person here who gains nothing from this except trouble. I will hear fully what she has seen and heard, not only today, but in all the time you have walked these halls. Eleanor's laugh was short and disbelieving. You mean the maid, she said. You mean to put our future in the hands of a servant's gossip? In the hands of her honesty, he said. The Queen nodded once. Bring the girl, she said to the steward. If she has been bold enough to step into our affairs, let us at least hear her voice. Eleanor's face went cold. My lady, she said to the Queen, with respect, we risk giving far too much importance to those below stairs. A servant's tale can ruin reputations if we let it. Today of all days must we stoop to this. "We will not stoop," the Queen said. "We will listen, and we will decide as sovereigns, not as puppets of convenience." She looked at her son. "See the girl in the vestry," she said. "Speak quickly. If the matter can be settled, do so. If not—" She did not finish. She did not need to. The steward hurried out. Eleanor stood very still. "Alexander," she said softly, when they were momentarily less surrounded, "you know me. You have known me for months. That girl has known you only as a distant figure, a story told downstairs. Do not let her tremble and tears persuade you more than my loyalty has." He looked at her. "I know you as you have chosen to show yourself to me," he said. "I know her as she cannot help but be. You will regret this delay," she whispered. "If you walk away from me now, you will not find another alliance so advantageous. The kingdom needs strength. My family brings it. The kingdom needs truth," he said. Voices rose near the back of the chapel. People were turning in their seats. The archbishop spoke softly to one of his attendants, his expression concerned. In the small chamber near the corridor where she had sat before, Clara stood again between the steward and the guard. "His Highness has called for you," the steward said, breathing a little faster this time. "To the chapel vestry. Do not be afraid, girl." "I am already afraid," she answered honestly. They led her quickly through lesser doors. The closer they came to the chapel, the louder the muffled sounds of many people grew, shifting, coughing, murmuring. She felt every heartbeat in her throat. At the vestry door, the steward paused. "Remember," he said, "speak as you have spoken. No more, no less." He opened the door. Alexander stood inside, his shoulders straight, his face pale but steady. The light from the small stained glass window colored the floor at his feet. He turned as Clara entered. For a moment no one else existed. Then the Queen slipped in behind him, her expression grave. The door closed, muffling the noise from the chapel. Clara dropped into a curtsy, lower than any she had ever made. "Your Majesty." "Your Highness," she whispered. "Rise," the Queen said. "We have little time." Clara straightened. Her hands twisted together until she forced them to be still. Alexander held up the letter again. "Clara," he said, "we have spoken already today. You told me how your dog found this, how you wiped away the dirt and saw the seal. I believed you then, I believe you now." She swallowed. "Thank you, sir. But I must know more," he continued. "Not only about this morning. About anything you have seen or heard from Lady Eleanor and her household that might touch on this, any threats, any talk of letters, of the king, of removing what should not exist." The Queen's gaze sharpened at that last phrase. Clara hesitated. "Your Highness," she said slowly, "I do not wish to speak ill of those above me. It is not my place." "Today it is," the Queen said quietly. "You may speak freely. Nothing said in this room will be held against you if it is the truth." Clara drew a shaky breath. "Yes, ma'am," she said. Alexander stepped closer, his voice low but urgent. "Clara," he said, "I must decide in the next moments whether to walk back into that chapel and take my vows as planned, or to stop the ceremony before it begins. I do not ask this lightly. I will bear whatever comes of my choice. But I cannot make it in darkness. I need to know whether my doubts are ghost or something more." She looked up at him. His eyes were clear, not commanding, not distant. They were the eyes of the boy she had once brought a book to, now carrying a weight that could crush or free them all. Her fear shifted into something sharper, responsibility. "Very well, sir," she whispered. "I will tell you what I have seen." He held her gaze, and the room seemed to narrow until there were only the three of them and the folded page between his fingers. "Clara," Alexander said, "I must know everything you have seen and heard, today and long before today." Clara's hands were cold, but her voice, when it came, was clearer than she expected. "It began weeks ago, sir," she said. "Not with the letter. With the way Lady Eleanor treated those below stairs." Alexander nodded once. "Tell me," he said. "She was often displeased," Clara said carefully. "If anything was not exactly as she wished, she would threaten to have people dismissed. Not only for mistakes, but for looking at her at the wrong moment, or for not moving quickly enough when she passed." The Queen watched her closely. "Words can be sharp without being schemes," the Queen said. "Go on." Clara drew a breath. "I have seen other fine ladies be sharp, ma'am," she said, "but I have not seen one smile sweetly at a man, and then, the moment he turns away, Speak of him as if he were dirt on her shoe. She did that often. She did it about your son, sir, when she thought no one was listening. Alexander's jaw tightened. What did she say? He asked. That he was too gentle, Clara answered. That once they were wed, her family would see to it that he learned to obey those who knew better. She laughed when she said it. She spoke of you as if you were something to be guided by a hand behind the curtain. The Queen's fingers curled. Who heard this? She asked. Her maid, Martha, and another lady, Clara said. They were in the dressing room. I was fetching a shawl. I do not think they saw me. I left before they finished speaking. Alexander looked down briefly, then up again. What of the letter? He asked. You said something earlier about removing what should not exist. Clara nodded. Yes, sir, a fortnight ago. I was sent with towels to the garden door. Lady Eleanor was there with Martha. She was angry. She said the king had left behind a poison on paper that might ruin everything if it were ever found. She told Martha that the thing must disappear, that she would not have her future at the mercy of a dead man's ink. Those were her words. The Queen's breath caught. She spoke of my husband that way? She asked, her voice low. Yes, ma'am, Clara said. Martha asked what she meant to do. Lady Eleanor said, burning leaves ashes. Ashes can be sifted. Into the earth it will go. The roses are greedy, they will eat it. I remember because it sounded wrong. And you saw the earth disturbed, Alexander said. Yes, sir, Clara said. Later that day, when I carried linens past the glass door, I saw a patch of soil near the white roses that had been turned over. Not as the gardeners do, neat and smooth, but hastily. I thought perhaps a dog had been at it. I thought no more of it until this morning, when Oliver scratched and came back with the letter. The soil on it was fresh underneath the dry layer. It had not lain there for years. She fell silent. The Queen exchanged a long look with her son. Has Lady Eleanor ever spoken to you directly of this? The Queen asked. Threatened you? Tried to buy your silence? Clara shook her head. No, ma'am, she said. She hardly saw me at all, unless there was something to scold. When she found me with the letter today, she called the steward and said I might be a thief. She told him to confine me until the wedding was over. She said it was for my sake. Alexander's mouth hardened. Did she deny knowing of the letter? He asked. She said it was a trifle, Clara replied. A forgotten paper. That a stray dog and a maid's imagination were not to be trusted. She asked the steward to wait until after the ceremony to show it to you, so it would not cloud your mind. The Queen let out a quiet breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but there was no mirth in it. That is not how a woman speaks who has nothing to fear from a piece of paper, she said. Alexander looked at Clara for a long moment. You understand, he said slowly, that what you have told us could ruin Lady Eleanor's standing, if we choose to believe it. If you have invented or embroidered it, you would be guilty of more than insolence. You would be guilty of slander against a noble house. I know, sir, Clara said. I wish I did not. I would sleep easier if I had nothing to say. Yet you say it, he murmured. Because you asked, she whispered. Because your father's letter was in the ground. And because when I looked at it, I thought of the way he once handed me an apple and told me to be good to the horses for him. He was kind, sir. I could not bear the thought that his last words to you would be eaten by roses. The Queen's eyes softened. My husband did give apples to children, she said quietly. He thought it important to know the names of those who mucked the stables, as well as those who sat on councils. Clara looked down, embarrassed. I do not ask for anything, ma'am, she said. Not reward, not favour. If I may keep my place, I will be grateful. If not, at least I will not have kept silent. The room was still for a heartbeat. Then Alexander folded the letter again, very carefully. Mother, he said, I have heard enough. The Queen inclined her head once. So have I, she said. He turned to Clara. You will not be punished, he said. You have shown more loyalty to this crown than many who wear jewels for it. Whatever happens next, you are under my protection. Do you understand? Her eyes stung. Yes, sir, she whispered. Wait here, he said, with my mother. You are not to be locked away again. If anyone questions it, they may answer to me. He moved toward the door. Your Highness, Clara blurted, before she could stop herself. He paused, hand on the latch. Yes? Please, she said, voice shaking. Do not make your choice because of me. If I have erred, let it fall on me alone. Do not let my words break something you wish to keep." He looked back at her, and there was a faint, sad smile in his eyes. "My wishes," he said softly, "have had little place in this day from the start. If something breaks now, it will be because it was already cracked. All you have done is hold a light to it." He opened the door and stepped out. The Queen moved closer to Clara. "You are pale, child," she said. "Sit before you fall." Clara obeyed. Her legs were no steadier than they had been before, but her mind felt strangely clearer. "Do you believe me, ma'am?" she asked, very low. The Queen looked at her for a long moment. "I knew my husband," she said. "I know my son. I know the House of Ashbourne. I believe that everything you have told us fits together more neatly than any lie could. That is enough." Clara lowered her eyes. "Thank you, ma'am." Outside, the murmur of the crowd swelled as doors opened and closed. The organist faltered, then left his hands resting on the keys. The Archbishop shifted his weight. Alexander walked back into the chapel, alone. He did not go to the altar immediately. He went halfway, then stopped where all could see him. The Master of Ceremonies looked as if he might faint. The Archbishop lifted his brows. The Queen, re-entering from the vestry door a moment later, took her place in the front pew, her face unreadable. Lady Eleanor stood near the opposite entrance still, her veil now lowered, her bouquet held like a shield. Alexander bowed his head briefly to the Archbishop, then turned to face the assembled guests. "Your Grace," he said, "Your Majesty, honoured guests, and people of this kingdom." His voice carried, not loud, but clear. "I must ask your patience for a matter of grave importance. A letter from my late father has come to light this morning. It was addressed to me, but lost before I could receive it. Only now, on this day, has it found its way into my hands." A murmur ran through the pews. The Archbishop frowned slightly. "A letter?" he repeated. "A warning," Alexander said, "from a king to his son, regarding the very alliance we are about to seal." He did not hold up the letter. He did not read from it. He kept it folded in his hand, like something private and weighty. "In this letter," he went on, "my father speaks of doubts he held about certain members of the House of Ashbourne and about their intentions toward the crown. He writes of pressures, of proposed unions, of a desire not merely for honor, but for control. He cautions me to be wary of charm that hides purpose, of devotion that conceals design." Heads turned. Fans fluttered. Someone dropped a program. Alexander lifted a hand. "I will not repeat every word," he said. "They were written for me, and I take them as such. But I cannot in good conscience stand before God and this kingdom, pretending I have not heard them." He looked toward Eleanor. "I have spoken with Lady Eleanor," he said. "She tells me that my father was misled, that his fears were unfounded, that to heed his warning now would be to give more weight to the dead than to the living." Eleanor stood very still. "But I have also learned," Alexander continued, "that this letter did not simply go astray. It was hidden, buried, kept from me by deliberate act. That act did not come from a place of love for me or for this kingdom." He let that settle. "I will not name here every detail," he said. "I will not drag private ugliness into public air. We are not gathered for spectacle, but for sacred vow. Yet that is precisely why I cannot proceed, as if nothing has changed. A vow taken under false light is no vow at all." The Archbishop stirred. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "are you saying you wish to postpone the ceremony?" Postpone. It was a gentler word than the choice he had already formed in his mind. Alexander did not take it. "I am saying," he replied, "that I cannot today take Lady Eleanor as my wife." The words fell like a stone dropped into deep water. For a moment there was no sound at all. Then the chapel erupted in whispers. Some were shocked, some angry, some intrigued. A foreign ambassador leaned toward his neighbor, eyes gleaming. A dowager gasped into her handkerchief. Eleanor's head snapped back as if struck. Her veil quivered with her breath. "You humiliate me," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. Alexander turned to her fully. "I have no wish to humiliate you," he said. "That is why I speak in generalities, not specifics. I could say more. I choose not to." "You choose," she said slowly, "to cast me aside in front of the whole kingdom, based on the scribblings of a dying man and the gossip of a servant." He flinched slightly at the cruelty toward his father, but his voice remained steady. "I choose to honor my father's final counsel," he said, "and the courage of someone who brought me truth at great cost to herself." "Truth?" Eleanor scoffed. "You call it that?" Her composure cracked then, only for a moment. "You stood in my chamber," she went on, eyes bright behind the veil, "and told me you believed in us. You let me believe that today would secure my place at your side. Now, because of a letter dragged in by a mongrel, you throw away everything we have built." "There is little built that cannot bear being touched," he said quietly. She stared at him, breathing hard. "You will regret this, Alexander," she whispered. "When the foreign courts hear, when your own people gossip, when you find yourself surrounded by enemies and no strong house to shield you, you will remember that you sent me away for the sake of a girl with raw hands." Faces strained to hear. Some pretended not to. Alexander inclined his head. "I may regret many things," he said, "but I will not regret refusing to bind my life to someone who hides what she ought to bring into the light. You are not without merit, Lady Eleanor. You are accomplished, poised, and able, but trust once broken or concealed cannot be the foundation of the throne." He looked toward the Queen. "Mother," he said, "I ask your support in my decision. I know it will bring trouble. I accept that." The Queen studied him for a heartbeat, then rose. "You have chosen the harder path," she said. "That is often the sign it is the right one. I stand with you, my son." She turned to Eleanor. "Lady Eleanor," she said, her voice formal now, "the Crown recognizes your distress. We will not speak today of guilt or innocence before all these witnesses. Instead, we grant you leave to withdraw with dignity. You may return to your family's estate while we consider matters further. Whatever the outcome, no one here will say that you were dragged from this chapel in disgrace." Eleanor's chin lifted. "The disgrace is already done," she said. "Not in the way you mean," the Queen replied. "You will find your path, but it will not be here, not at my son's side." Eleanor's hand shook once on her bouquet, then stilled. Years of training and pride gathered around her like a cloak. "Very well," she said. She turned in a small whirl of silk and walked back down the aisle she had never fully entered, head held high, her maids scrambling to follow. Guests parted for her, half bowing, half staring. The choir did not sing. The organ did not play. Only the low murmur of voices followed her to the door. When it closed behind her, the sound of the latch was strangely loud. The Archbishop cleared his throat. "Your Majesty," he said softly to the Queen, "shall I dismiss the congregation?" The Queen inclined her head. "Yes, Your Grace," she said. "There will be no wedding today." He turned, lifted his hands, and addressed the crowd. "My lords, ladies, and honored guests," he said, "by royal decision, today's ceremony is suspended. Go in peace and pray for wisdom upon your sovereigns." There was nothing else to say. People rose, rustling, whispering, casting glances at Alexander as they filed out. Some looked sympathetic, some calculating, some offended. He met none of their eyes. He stood still until the bulk of them had gone. Only then did he release the breath he had been holding. The Queen came to stand beside him. "You will have storms for this," she said quietly. "The Ashbournes will not forgive the public disappointment. The ambassadors will report home with their own versions of events. The council will demand explanations. I will give them the truth," he said. "They may not like it," she replied. "I have lived too long trying to please those who like what is easy," he said. "I am done with it." She looked at him, and there was a hint of proud relief in her eyes. "You are more your father's son today than you have ever been," she said. He would have approved. He swallowed. "Thank you," he murmured. She touched his arm briefly. "Go and see the girl," she said. "She will be half sick with worry. It is cruel to leave her guessing how you decided." He nodded. "I will," he said. He left the letter with her for safekeeping and went back toward the vestry. Clara was still seated where he had left her, hands clasped tight, eyes fixed on a knot in the wooden floor. When he entered, she jumped up so quickly she nearly lost her balance. "Your Highness," she said, breathless, "I heard voices. Is it over? I mean, is the ceremony—" "It is suspended," he said. "There was no ceremony. There will be no marriage between Lady Eleanor and me." Her lips parted. "Because of the letter," she whispered. "Because of the letter," he agreed. Because of what it showed me. Because of what you told me. Because I could not vow to a woman I cannot trust with my father's memory or my own mind. She stared at him, bewildered. I did not think, she began, then stopped. I did not mean to break your life apart, sir. A short, rough laugh escaped him. You have not broken it, he said. You have kept it from being chained to something that would have broken it later. He stepped closer. Clara, he said softer. Look at me. She lifted her gaze. You have been honest with me when those with everything to gain from my favor chose comfort over truth, he said. You risked your position, your peace, perhaps even your home, because you thought I should know what my father tried to tell me. I do not know how to repay that. I did not do it for repayment, she said quickly. I know, he said. That is why it means so much. His eyes moved over her face, as if seeing it properly for the first time. I remember, he said, a girl in the stable yard holding a book twice the size of her hands. My father had just left and she told me it was a good story. She was right. Heat rose in her cheeks. I should not have spoken to you then, she murmured. It was bold. It was honest, he said again. You told me the ending, even when I did not want to hear that the hero suffered before he found his peace. You were sad that day, she said quietly. I thought you would like to know he did not stay sad forever. He smiled faintly. And now you bring me another ending I did not wish to hear, he said. And once again, it may keep me from staying unhappy forever. Words crowded in her throat. None seemed safe. He took a small breath. I will not pretend, he said, that this does not change many things. There will be talk. There will be pressure to choose another bride quickly, to repair the slight to the Ashbournes, to forge some new alliance. Of course, sir, she said. You are a prince. You must marry someone. Yes, he said. Someone. He hesitated. I have thought, he added, in these last hours, about what I truly need beside me. Not a name in the peerage book. Not a house with soldiers. Someone whose first loyalty is to truth, not to advantage. Someone who will tell me when I am wrong, not only when I am convenient. That is a heavy burden to place on anyone, she said. It is lighter than the burden of lies, he replied. He looked down at her work-rough hands. I cannot say, he went on, that my mind is clear enough today to make such a decision immediately. I have broken one promise before I made it. I will not make another in haste. But I can say this. Whatever partner I choose, if I am allowed to choose, I want her to be more like you than like anyone else who stood in that chapel. Clara's heart stuttered. Like me, she repeated, barely audible. Yes, he said. Like you. He gave a small, searching smile. Do you understand what I'm saying? He asked. I think so, she whispered, but I dare not believe it. He drew in a slow breath. Clara, he said, I owe it to you and to myself not to speak of marriage when my hands are still full of the remains of another, but I can tell you that my regard for you is not the regard of a prince for a useful servant. Her eyes widened. You honor me too much, sir, she said. I have honored you too little until now, he replied. I would like to change that. Footsteps passed in the corridor. Voices called orders about carriages, about guests, about the dispersal of leftover flowers. The world went on, unaware of the small, fragile circle in the vestry. Alexander lowered his voice. In the days to come, he said, there will be inquiries, letters, anger. You may be spoken of harshly by those who preferred the letter remain buried. I will not allow harm to come to you, but I cannot promise that tongues will be kind. I have never expected kindness from tongues, sir, she said, with a faint, rueful smile. He looked at her with something like admiration. That is what I mean, he said. You see the world clearly and still choose to do what is right. I will speak to my mother, to the council. I will argue that when the time comes for me to wed, I must be free to choose someone I trust, regardless of her birth. I do not know if they will yield, but I will try, for my own sake as much as yours. She stared at him. You would fight your council for that? She asked. I would fight them for less, he said lightly. They have been wrong before. The line of his mouth softened. For now, he went on, I ask only one thing of you. Yes, sir, she said. Do not leave, he said. Do not slip away to your village, or take a post in another house, or vanish because you fear you have caused too much trouble here. Stay. Let me see whether the life that has opened before me today has room, in truth, for you. Her throat closed. "Will stay," she managed. "If I am allowed. There is nowhere else I wish to be." Relief flickered in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. At that moment, the vestry door nudged inward. A small brown and white nose pushed through, followed by a determined head. Oliver trotted in as if he owned the castle. Clara let out a soft, helpless laugh. "You incorrigible creature," she said. "How do you keep finding us?" Alexander looked down at the dog, then back at her. "It seems he has chosen his loyalties as firmly as you have," he said. "We owe him much." Oliver sat, tail thumping, and eyed the prince expectantly. Alexander crouched, ignoring the astonished intake of breath from a passing attendant in the hall. "Sir Oliver," he said solemnly, scratching the dog's ears, "you have rendered your king to be a great service. I am in your debt." Oliver licked his hand in reply. Clara watched them, something warm and unfamiliar growing in her chest. Alexander rose again. "There will be changes," he said. "Some will be hard. Some, I hope, will be good. When they begin, I would like you to be near, Clara, not only as a maid, but as—" "Clara." She nodded. "I will stand where you place me, sir," she said, "and if I see something that should not be in the earth, I will tell you." He smiled. "That," he said, "is exactly what I hope." Outside, the last of the wedding guests' carriages rattled away from the castle. Inside, among discarded ribbons and untaken vows, a prince and a maid stood together in a quiet room, the distance between their stations narrowed by truth and choice. For the first time that day, Alexander's shoulders eased. "We have had enough of other people deciding our paths for us," he said. "From now on, I mean to walk mine with my own eyes open." Clara looked at him, at Oliver, at the door that led back into a changed world. "I should like to see where that path leads," she said softly. The scandal did not last as long as everyone said it would. For a week, perhaps two, Windsor buzzed like an overturned hive. Letters flew in and out. Courtiers whispered in corners. The newspapers printed careful lines about a postponed royal union and His Highness's remarkable devotion to paternal counsel. Then another minor uproar appeared somewhere else in the kingdom. A railway dispute. A foreign prince behaving badly in Paris. The world, which never stopped for private hearts, moved on. Inside the castle, things did not move on quite so quickly. Clara returned to her duties as if nothing had changed. She rose early, carried linens, polished silver, fetched water. People watched her more than they had before. Some looked with curiosity, some with envy, some with quiet sympathy. "Do not let them unsettle you," Mrs. Jenkins muttered one morning, handing her a stack of napkins. They would stare at a broom if the prince glanced at it twice. "He only glanced," Clara said. "He did not—" "Child," Mrs. Jenkins cut in, not unkindly. "I have seen many things in this house. I have not often seen a prince call a maid by her Christian name in the vestry, while the archbishop waits. Do not pretend it meant nothing." Clara flushed. "It meant the truth mattered," she said. "That is all." Mrs. Jenkins gave her a look that said she was not fooled, but she let it rest. Oliver, for his part, accepted his new fame as his due. No one dared kick him now. He trotted through the halls with his tail high, stopping only when the Queen herself clicked her tongue and offered him a scrap from her own plate. "Well, Sir Oliver," she said once dryly as he licked her fingers, "it seems you have earned your place in history." Clara hovered in the doorway, stunned. "Ma'am," she murmured, "I did not mean—" The Queen raised a hand. "Do not start apologizing again," she said. "Between you and this animal, my son has begun to speak like a sovereign who knows his own mind. I will bear the inconvenience of wagging tails for that." "Thank you, ma'am," Clara said softly. Not everything was so easy. The Ashbournes sent a cold, beautifully worded letter expressing deep disappointment and profound concern for the prince's judgment. Some members of the council hinted that perhaps Alexander had acted impulsively, that grief and youth might have clouded his reason. He met them in the council chamber, the letter from his father in front of him. "You may disagree with my decision," he said calmly, "but do not suggest it was rash. I had all the information I needed. I will not apologize for refusing to build my marriage on a secret buried in a flower-bed." One of the older lords cleared his throat. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "no one disputes the oddity of the matter, but alliances must be maintained, bridges repaired. The House of Ashbourne is powerful. To slight them might prove costly. I'm aware, Alexander said. Yet, what price would we pay if the kingdom were ruled, even in part, by those who see the crown as something to be bent to their will? My father warned me. A maid confirmed what he feared. I listened. That is not weakness. It is prudence. The queen sat beside him, hands folded. My husband trusted his instincts to the end, she said. Our son does no less. The kingdom will learn to trust him for it. The council murmured, but they bowed. After that, the opposition softened. No one wanted to stand openly against a queen supporting her son. Still, no one expected what Alexander said next. It happened on an afternoon 3 weeks after the broken wedding day. The queen, the council, and Alexander sat again around the long table. We must consider, one of the ministers said cautiously, the matter of your future marriage, Your Highness. The public will expect that the breach with Lady Eleanor will be remedied by some new alliance. There are daughters of suitable houses. Alexander lifted a hand. There is one matter we must settle before we speak of candidates, he said. If I marry, it must be to a woman I trust completely. If such a woman happens to belong to a noble house, so be it. If she does not, I will not discard her for lack of a title. The room went very still. Your Highness, another lord said slowly, surely you cannot mean— I mean precisely that, Alexander said. The late king chose his bride first for herself. My mother was not the highest match on paper. She was the best match for him. The kingdom flourished on that choice. The queen's gaze softened at that, but she said nothing. Times have changed, the lord said. Expectations. Expect the heir to the throne to be locked into a contract like a horse at auction, Alexander interrupted. Perhaps. Yet I do not intend to be sold, my lord. If you wish a king who bends to every family hungry for his crown, you may petition heaven for another son. I am the only one you have. It was a rare thing for him to raise his voice. It had an effect. Silence descended. The queen spoke at last. You have someone in mind, she said quietly. Yes, Alexander said. The room waited. She is honest, he went on. She has nothing to gain by flattering me. She has already risked everything by telling me what I did not wish to hear. Without her, we would be bound to a house that thought burying a king's words was clever strategy. With her, I have a chance to be the kind of ruler my father hoped I would be. And her name? The queen asked, though Clara suspected she already knew. Alexander met his mother's eyes. Clara, he said. The maid from the servants' hall. The one with the dog and the courage. A ripple of shock passed around the table. A maid, one lord muttered. Impossible. Another, bolder man said it outright. This cannot be, Your Highness, he said. It breaks every custom we have. Alexander folded his hands. Custom is not law, he said. It is habit. Habits can be changed when they prove unworthy. Your Highness, the First Lord said, struggling for calm, think of the example. The crown must maintain distance, mystery. If you marry below your station, every servant girl in the kingdom will fancy herself a princess in waiting. We will be flooded with ambitions from below stairs. Then perhaps those above stairs will behave more kindly, Alexander replied, for fear that the next queen may remember how they treated her when she dusted their boots. The queen's lips twitched despite herself. Son, she murmured, you speak dangerously. I speak plainly, he said. I am not blind. I know what this will cost me. Some houses will be offended, some foreign courts will sneer, but there will also be people, in villages, in workshops, in fields, who will hear that the prince chose a wife for her character, not her rank. That may do this kingdom more good than any treaty with Ashbourne. The council argued, cajoled, protested. They spoke of precedent, of bloodlines, of insulted dukes. Alexander listened, but he did not yield. At last the queen raised her hand. Enough, she said. We have heard the objections. Here is mine. If this girl were a silly romantic with stars in her eyes, I would forbid it at once. If she had plotted to gain his attention, I would send her away. But she did neither. She has behaved with more dignity under pressure than many of us at this table. I have watched her. She serves without pretense. She speaks only when spoken to. When she did speak out of turn, it was to protect my son from deception. She looked at Alexander. Bring her to me, she said. I will speak to her myself. If I find her wanting, you must accept my judgment. If I find her worthy, The council will have to adjust its habits. The lords looked ready to protest again, but they knew better than to argue with the Queen on that point. Alexander bowed his head, relief in the slope of his shoulders. "Thank you, Mother," he said. Clara knew nothing of these exact words. She only knew that one afternoon, when she was polishing a pair of candlesticks, Mrs. Jenkins appeared in the doorway with a look that combined triumph and terror. "Put that down," Mrs. Jenkins whispered. "Wash your hands, smooth your hair. The Queen has sent for you." Clara's heart dropped into her stomach. "The Queen," she repeated. "Why?" Mrs. Jenkins pursed her lips. "If you do not know," she said, "then you are even more modest than I thought. Do not argue, go. And for heaven's sake, do not fiddle with your apron when you stand before her." Clara washed her hands until her knuckles were pink, smoothed her hair as best she could, and walked to the antechamber outside the Queen's private rooms. Oliver trotted at her heel until a footman blocked him gently. "Not this time, Sir Oliver," he said. "Her Majesty has not given instructions about dogs." Oliver sat down, offended. "I will be quick," Clara whispered to him. "Stay." She stepped inside when summoned. The Queen sat by the window, sewing something small and white. She looked up as Clara bowed. "Clara," she said, "come closer. I do not bite." Clara obeyed, stopping at a respectful distance. "You sent for me, ma'am," she said. "Is there something amiss in my work?" The Queen's mouth curved faintly. "On the contrary," she said, "if there were, I would not be considering entrusting you with more than polishing candlesticks." Clara blinked. "I do not understand, ma'am." The Queen set her sewing aside. "My son wishes to marry you," she said, as calmly as if she were remarking on the weather. Clara stopped breathing. "I beg your pardon," she whispered. "You heard me well enough," the Queen said. "Do not faint. I have no patience for swooning." "I will not faint," Clara managed. "I think my heart has left my body, but I will not faint." The Queen gave a small, approving nod. "Good," she said. "Sit." Clara perched on the very edge of a chair, hands clenched together. "I will speak plainly," the Queen said. "Alexander is stubborn. Once he has set his mind, only disaster or death moves it. I have seen this from the day he refused to leave a lame foal in the mud. He has now set that mind on you." Clara swallowed. "I did not ask him to," she said quickly. "I did not hint, did not—" "I know," the Queen cut in. "If you had, I would have found it out. You have behaved with more restraint than half my ladies. That is one point in your favor." Clara stared at her folded hands. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "I respect His Highness more than anyone in the world, but I am a servant. The kingdom expects better of him than me." "The kingdom," the Queen said, "expects whatever we tell it to expect. It may grumble, but it will obey. My concern is not the kingdom's gossip. It is whether you understand what this would mean." She leaned forward slightly. "Life as a maid is hard," she said. "Life near the throne is harder. You would be watched constantly, judged for every word, every dress, every expression. Those who dislike you will say you entrapped him. Those who envy you will call you ungrateful if you so much as sigh. You would be expected to smile at people who insult you, to sit through dinners you do not enjoy, to bear children under the eyes of 100 opinions. And through it all you must not lose yourself." Clara listened, eyes wide. "It sounds—" She searched for a word that was not ungrateful. "Difficult, ma'am." "It is," the Queen said. "There is joy, too. Love, companionship, influence. But difficulty is woven through it. I will not see my son break his heart against a life shared with someone who did not know what she was accepting." Clara looked up. "I have never thought of myself as someone meant for ease, ma'am," she said. "Difficult is not new to me." "That is not enough," the Queen said. "Tell me this, do you love him?" The question landed like a stone in a still pond. Clara's cheeks burned. She swallowed. "I respect him. I admire him. I trust him. When he speaks, I feel as if I can breathe more fully. When he entered the chapel that day, I prayed he would choose the harder path, not for my sake, but for his. When I thought he might not, my heart hurt. When he did," she shook her head. "If that is not love, ma'am, I do not know what else to call it." The Queen watched her quietly. "You did not mention his face," she said, "or his title." Clara gave a tiny, startled laugh. "I should not dare," she said. "His face and title do not need my praise. They have enough from others. It is his self I care for. The Queen's shoulders loosened. That, she said, is the right answer. She picked up her sewing again, though she did not yet take a stitch. You must understand, she went on, that if I consent there will be no half measures. You will not be kept in some shadowed corner as his secret comfort. You will stand beside him in full view as his wife. Some will cheer, some will sneer, some will test you. You must meet them all without shrinking. Do you believe I can, Mum? Clara asked, almost afraid of the answer. The Queen threaded her needle. You faced Lady Eleanor in the corridor, she said. You faced my son in the vestry. You faced me just now without fainting. I begin to suspect there is more steel in you than in half the swords in the armory. Yes, I believe you can. Clara's breath trembled. Then, she could hardly say it, then you will allow. I will allow nothing, the Queen said briskly. My son is no child seeking permission for an extra sweet. He is a man, nearly a king. He has chosen. I simply choose not to stand in his way. I will support this union, Clara. But I will also hold you to the same standard I hold him. Tell him the truth, always, even when it costs you. Especially then. Clara nodded hard. I will, Ma'am, she whispered. See that you do, the Queen said. Now go. And when he asks you, try not to make him suffer too long. He has had a trying month. Clara rose on unsteady legs. Yes, Ma'am. Thank you, Ma'am. She backed out of the room, nearly colliding with Oliver, who had sneaked closer than allowed. Oliver, she hissed, scooping him up. You will have me thrown out before I have even said yes. Before she had reached the end of the corridor, she heard footsteps behind her. Clara. She turned. Alexander stood there, alone for once, without attendants or advisers. His coat was simple, not ceremonial. His hair had escaped its careful styling and curled slightly at his temples. Clara's heart thudded. Your Highness, she said. Alexander, he said gently. If we are to have the conversation I hope we are, it must be Alexander. As you wish. Alexander, she said, the name strange and warm in her mouth. He smiled. My mother has spoken to you, he guessed. Yes, she said. She told me you are stubborn. He laughed under his breath. She has told me that every day since I was 3, he said. No doubt she hopes you will help manage it. I am not sure anyone can manage you, Clara said before thinking, then clapped a hand to her mouth. Forgive me, He looked delighted. Do not apologize, he said. That is precisely what I need. He drew a breath and glanced around. Will you walk with me? He asked. There is a place I would like us to stand when I ask what I have to ask. She hesitated only a moment. Yes, she said. They walked through a side door, down a small stair, and into the gardens. The roses were in fuller bloom now. The patch of earth where the letter had lain had been carefully smoothed and replanted, but Clara could not help glancing at it as they passed. So much trouble from one small piece of ground, she murmured. So much good, he corrected gently. They stopped beneath a tree that cast a soft circle of shade. From here the chapel roof was just visible, along with a sliver of the path where foreign guests had once walked in fine clothes. This seems the right place, Alexander said quietly. Where secrets came to light, where my life turned on a dog's whim and a maid's conscience. Clara held Oliver tighter. He wriggled, uninterested in the solemnity. Clara, Alexander said, turning to face her fully, I have told my mother and the council that I wish to marry you. I have argued, insisted, and refused to bend when they raised every objection they could invent. My mother has agreed to support us. The council will grumble, but they will fall in line. The only person whose answer I do not yet know is yours. Her breath caught. You know it, she whispered. I hope I do, he said. But hope is not the same as hearing it from your lips. He took a step closer. Will you, he said softly, share your life with me? Not as a servant standing at the door, but as my wife, as my companion, as the one person in this world who may tell me when I am being a fool and whom I will thank for it. Tears pricked her eyes. I will tell you even when you do not thank me, she said unsteadily. You may be a prince, but that does not make you always right. His eyes shone. Is that a yes? He asked. Yes, she said. The word came out simple, clear. It felt like stepping into sunlight. He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh and for a moment closed his eyes. "Thank God," he murmured. He reached for her hands, then hesitated. "May I?" he asked. She nodded. His fingers closed around hers. They were warm, steady. "You understand," he said, "that I cannot promise you ease. There will be days when you curse the crown and the walls and the endless ceremonies. There will be eyes on you always. There will be people who never forgive you for standing where they thought someone else should." "I understand," she said, "but wherever I stand, I would rather see the truth beside me. That is you." He swallowed. "And you," he said, "are the truth I did not know I needed until you put that letter in my hands." Oliver barked once, as if unwilling to be left out. Alexander glanced down. "And you, Sir Oliver," he added gravely, "will of course have a place of honor at the wedding." Clara laughed through her tears. "He will disgrace us," she warned. "He will steal cake from the table and fall asleep in the aisle. Then the kingdom will know their rulers have better company than their politest guests," Alexander replied. News of the betrothal reached the castle that evening, and the kingdom soon after. The reactions were exactly as the Queen had predicted. In the great houses, some were outraged. "A maid?" gasped one duchess, nearly spilling her tea. "What will he do next?" knight the butler. "Better him than half the lords we have," her niece muttered. In taverns and in cottages, people reacted differently. "Have you heard?" a blacksmith's apprentice said, wiping soot from his hands. "The prince is to marry a servant girl. A brave one, they say," his master replied. "Stood up to fine folk and saved him from a bad match. Perhaps there is hope for us yet." At Windsor, preparations began again. There were to be flowers and music as before, but less glitter, fewer foreign guests, more familiar faces. The Queen insisted upon proper gowns, proper ceremony, proper dignity. Clara submitted herself to fittings and instruction, stumbling over the new weight of silk at her hem, laughing when Mrs. Jenkins cried over the sight of her in white. "I never thought to see one of my girls in lace before the altar," Mrs. Jenkins sniffed. "Mind you, do not forget how to fold a sheet." "I could never forget," Clara said, hugging her. "You would haunt me." On the morning of the wedding, the bells sounded again. They were the same bells, but they rang differently in Clara's ears. She stood before a small mirror, hands trembling as she touched the simple veil at her hair. "Breathe," a lady's maid murmured, fastening the last button. "You look as if you were about to face a firing squad, not a husband." "I have never faced either," Clara replied. "It is all equally strange." Oliver sat at her feet, a narrow ribbon tied at his neck. He scratched at it sulkily. "You look distinguished," she told him. "Behave yourself and you might get a piece of cake." The door opened. The Queen stepped in, dressed in deep blue, a small smile softening her features. "May I?" she asked. Clara nearly jumped. "Ma'am," she said, dropping into an instinctive curtsy despite the dress. "None of that," the Queen said briskly. "If you bend any lower, your seams will split. Stand up. Let me see." Clara obeyed. The Queen looked her over slowly, taking in the gown, the veil, the nervous hands. "You look like yourself," she said at last. "I am glad. I was afraid they would turn you into a doll." "They tried," Clara admitted. "I refused the extra pearls." The Queen chuckled. "My son will be grateful he can find you under all that," she said. "Are you ready?" "No," Clara said honestly. "But I will walk anyway." "That is all any bride has ever done," the Queen replied. "Take my arm, child. Today you go to him with my blessing." Clara's throat tightened. "Thank you, ma'am," she whispered. They walked together through the corridor. Servants peered from doorways, smiling openly now. Some dabbed their eyes. Mrs. Jenkins sniffed loudly. The steward stood straighter than ever, proud in his modest way. At the chapel door, the Queen squeezed Clara's hand and moved aside. Music rose, not from trumpets, but from a small ensemble of strings and voices. The aisle was lined not only with nobles, but with familiar faces from the household. The baker, the stablemaster, the gardener, cheeks pink, hands scrubbed raw. Alexander stood at the front, waiting. He wore no crown, only a well-cut coat and a simple sash. His eyes, when he saw her, lit in a way that made the whole room blur for Clara. She walked. Every step felt both heavy and light, as if she were learning to move in a world with different air. When she reached him, her hand shook as she placed it in his. He closed his fingers around hers, steady and sure. "You are radiant," he said softly, "and terrified." "Yes," she whispered, "on both counts." "Good," he said. "I am terrified as well. It seems fair." The Archbishop, the same man who had waited in vain weeks before, cleared his throat with more warmth this time. "Dearly beloved," he began, but his eyes had a hint of smile in them that had not been there before. The vows were spoken. Alexander's voice did not tremble when he promised to love and protect, to listen and to lead. Clara's did tremble when she promised to stand beside him in all things, but it did not fail. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, the world narrowed to the circle of his touch, the quiet weight of the band, the way his eyes never left hers. "You may seal your vows," the Archbishop said. Alexander hesitated a fraction, as if asking without words. Clara gave the smallest nod. He bent his head and kissed her, not in the hungry way of some stories, but with a depth that made her knees weak. It was not a claim, but a promise. She felt it in the way his hand tightened gently at her waist, in the way his breath caught. When he drew back, the chapel erupted in applause, not the restrained murmurs of polite society, but genuine, hearty clapping. The servants in the gallery cheered. Someone whistled before remembering himself. Oliver barked, loudly. Laughter rippled through the room. "Someone approves," Alexander murmured. They walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife. Outside, on the broad steps, the air was cool, the sky stretched wide. The crowd gathered in the courtyard. Staff, townsfolk allowed in for the day, a scattering of nobles, lifted their faces. "Long live Prince Alexander," someone shouted. "And Princess Clara," another added, bold and bright. The words rolled over her like a wave. "Princess," she said under her breath, tasting it. "If you prefer another title," Alexander said quietly, "we can invent one." "It is not the title that feels strange," she said. "It is the idea that they mean me." "They do," he replied, "and they will know in time that it means more than a dress. It means that anyone, anywhere, may be asked to carry a truth that changes the world." They stood together at the top of the steps, hands entwined. "Say something," the Queen whispered from behind them. "They will not forget this day. Give them a memory worth keeping." Alexander looked at Clara. "Will you speak with me?" he asked. Her eyes widened. "I," she whispered, "I will stumble." "So will I," he said. "Then they will know we are human." He stepped forward, drawing her with him. "People of Windsor," he called, his voice carrying across the courtyard, "and of this kingdom. Today you see something that has not often been seen. A prince marrying a woman without title, without lands, without powerful relatives. Some may wonder why." He glanced at her, then back at them. "It is not a tale of a princess disguised as a maid," he said. "She is exactly who she has always been. It is a tale of honesty, of a servant who chose truth over safety, of a dog who dug where others would not, of a king who tried to speak from beyond his grave. You may think it strange. I think it right." He lifted their joined hands. "If there is a lesson in this," he said, "let it be this. Your birth does not measure your worth. Your courage does. Your kindness does. Your willingness to speak when silence would be easier does. I hope to rule you with such courage. I hope we will remind each other of it when we falter." He turned to her. "Do you wish to add anything, my love?" he asked. The term made her flush, but it steadied her too. She looked at the many faces below. Some were smiling. Some were merely curious. A girl near the back, her apron dusty, stared with wide, shining eyes. "I am no orator," Clara called, her voice thinner but clear. "But I will say this. I was once a child at these gates, watching fine carriages pass. I thought the people inside were made of some different substance than I. Today I know better. They are as human as any of us. They make mistakes. They can be wrong. They can also sometimes hear a truth from someone they were taught not to heed." She squeezed Alexander's hand. "If you ever think you are too small to matter," she went on, "remember a maid who picked up a dirty case and a dog who brought it. Remember that a kingdom shifted because of them. If you see something buried that should be brought into the light, do not be afraid to dig." A murmur of approval swept the crowd. Someone shouted, "Here, here!" A woman wiped her eyes with her apron. Alexander looked at her with open admiration. "You said you were no orator," he murmured. "You were wrong." "I had help," she whispered back, glancing at Oliver. He wagged his tail as if understanding. As the cheers rose again, Alexander leaned in close enough that only she could hear. "Are you happy?" he asked. She turned her face toward his, eyes bright. "Yes," she said simply. "Terrified, overwhelmed, and happy." "Good," he said. "So am I." They stood there a moment longer, letting the sound wash over them. Later, when the feasting was done and the music faded, when the guests had gone to their rooms and the corridors grew quiet, Alexander and Clara slipped out onto a small balcony that overlooked the dark garden. The roses were shadows now. The patch of earth that had once held the letter was invisible. The air was cool against their faces. Clara rested her hands on the stone railing. The ring on her finger caught a faint glimmer of light from the window behind them. "This is where my father used to stand on summer nights," Alexander said softly. He said it reminded him that the kingdom was more than courts and papers, that most of it lay out there sleeping and working and never seeing these walls. Clara looked out, imagining the towns, the villages, the rivers. "It is a heavy thing," she said quietly, "knowing so many lives are tied in some way to ours." "Yes," he replied, "but it is lighter knowing I am not carrying it alone." He slipped an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, feeling their shapes fit in a way that had nothing to do with height or station, and everything to do with choice. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what would have happened if Oliver had slept that morning instead of digging?" "Sometimes," he said. "Then I realize it does not matter. He did dig. You did pick up the letter. We are here. There is no world in which I would choose to go back." She smiled. "Nor I," she said. They stood in silence for a little while. Below, in the courtyard, a lone figure crossed with a lantern. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Oliver, exhausted by the day's excitements, snored softly on a cushion just inside the open door. Alexander pressed his lips to Clara's hair. "Whatever storms come," he said, "we will face them like we did this one, with our eyes open, with our hands joined, with a stubborn dog somewhere underfoot." Clara laughed, the sound quiet and full. "And when we do not know what to do," she asked. "Then," he said, "we will remember the day when honesty nearly broke us and instead set us free. We will choose truth again, even if our hands shake." She turned to look at him, the shadows softening his features. "I love you," she said. She had not yet said it plainly. It felt like crossing another threshold. His eyes shone. "I love you," he answered. "Not because you saved me from a bad marriage, or because the kingdom admires you. I would love you if no one ever knew your name. I would love you in a cottage as much as in a castle." "Good," she said, "because some days, when the council talks too long, we might have to hide in a cottage in our minds." He smiled. "We will," he said. "We will build it from stories and stubbornness, and we will let no one bury a single word inside its walls." They stood together, prince and former maid, husband and wife, looking out over a kingdom that did not yet know all they would do for it. Behind them, the bells that had rung for one wedding that never was, and one wedding that was, began to toll the hour. Each peal carried over rooftops and fields, into houses and hearts. A quiet promise wrapped in sound, that power without truth is hollow, that love without courage is thin, and that sometimes, when a small dog digs where he ought not, the world is given a second chance. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.